When I was in my early 20s, I had a friend with a psychotic, alcoholic father. She didn't live with her father as she was living in a remote coastal town. Now and again, we'd go visit him together and stay the night. Their relationship was creepy to say the least, but that's not what we're talking about now. One night, when we'd visited, my friend and her father had a big drunken argument. He kicked us out. It was around midnight. I hadn't bought my car as we got a lift down. My friend's dad lived a few miles out of town via a dirt road, which we started to walk onto town as there was a telephone booth. Phones weren't as common during this time. I wanted to call my parents. They lived a few hours away, to see if they'd come pick us up. My friend was drunkenly moaning about her and her father's relationship the whole way to town. She was still carrying on when we'd reached the phone booth. She sat on the bench next to the booth whilst I phoned my parents up. They agreed to pick us up. I sat down on the bench, ready for a long wait. Not long after, a van appeared and pulled up just behind where we were sitting. There were two young men in the front seats and they were looking right at us. I was feeling very nervous, when suddenly the van door slid open, revealing a number of guys in the back, at least two more. Where we were sitting, it was completely dead. There weren't any houses around, just more road. No people walking or driving about, nowhere to run. It was a crap little town in the middle of nowhere. I stood up to see them better, whilst keeping my eyes on the van full of men, aware of how vulnerable we are. I saw them looking back at us, talking amongst themselves, quiet to begin with, but getting louder, deliberately so we could listen. They were discussing pulling us into the back of the van, taking us somewhere and killing us. Not in those words, but that's more or less what they said. My whole body was quaking with fear. I couldn't take my eyes off the men. I can remember one of their faces so clearly that I could draw it. He was sitting in the door of the van, looking at me with dead, expressionless eyes, like I was just a thing. My friend was still sobbing. I'm unsure if she knew about the van or not. I had to tell her, but I was so scared I couldn't speak or move. Suddenly something amazing happened. My friend's father, who didn't apologize and was very stubborn, appeared from nowhere in his car, drunk. It was very unlike him to do this kind of thing, as he was so stubborn and held grudges for long periods. My friend and him had an emotional few moments whilst I was still watching the van. The men were now not talking but still watching us. "Let's go," I said. We got into the car and headed back towards my friend's dad's when the van started following us. I tried to tell her dad about the van. He said, "We'll slow down and let them past." They slowed right behind us, shouting threats in an aggressive manner. They continued to follow along the dirt road and into the driveway. They sat in the van behind us. We sat in the car, waiting. Every house around us were holiday homes. Nobody was home that night. We knew if they got out and carried out any threats, nobody could help us. After what seemed like hours, they eventually left. My parents came worried we weren't at the shops. My friend's father hid from them and they took me home. I refused to go to the police.